Hey there, rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you a showdown between Garrett Spencer on a black-blue-white Gandennia list versus Paul Reisman showing us his take on Utsunes. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now taking orders on our Q3 2024 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Vizjerei. Class is in session. So as we get into it here, just a reminder that you can go ahead and get your orders in for Battle at the Secret Ruins through Odyssey Games in the link in the description. You are not going to want to miss this set. We are jumping in here. Paul's starting off with a Solaria's Wind here, which we have seen kind of in our play group as a good way for green decks to kind of be able to play into this mirror meta. It's helpful if we're able to make things not as easy to chase or discount as we're getting into kind of a fight, especially with activate abilities with things like Persephone. Then a Callstone Pass from Garrett and a Sword of Progression from Paul at the end of turn, going into turn 2, hitting that Stone of Time, which is still a blue-green stone for Paul, which is great. Garrett dropping a 2-will for, or paying 200 for a Dark Alice Rabbit Princess. Definitely understand this being used for the Gandennia build, as she wants a lot of copies of Gandennia cards in her graveyard, as well as the Restraints of Empathy to be able to Judgment. So that makes a whole lot of sense for being able to help sculpt the deck. Going into turn 2 here. Going to see a second Stone Call hitting that Emerald Tablet Stone. Probably going to see either a pass or a setup of Gandennia's Mansion. It'd be a little bit risky going in for Mansion because it does come into play tapped, but you're playing against a little bit of a slower deck. So you do have to worry that you might be dealing with something like a second Sword of Progression, but that's the risk you take against a green deck. Sometimes you just have to slam cards and see what sticks. And the Mansion does open up a lot of options for Garrett in terms of being able to get things online, start getting that proccing your own damage, searching out for the big boards that Gandennia can put together. Pinging himself here for 2 with the Moonshade to then play the Gandennias. It does get to resolve, and then going into an attack with the Dark Alice. We do see Perseus Big Show come down for Paul. I'm curious as to why we used the Moonshade as opposed to the Emerald Tablet. Paying 100 versus 200, more card load diversity. Maybe the thought is just get myself life lost down as slow as possible. Could be an option. Big Show here, number 1, just doing some sculpting here. Big Show number 2, choosing to maybe see if we can draw into something. Do we see a response from Garrett? Nope, that's just going to get to resolve too. Get to sculpt the hand. Paul obviously found what he likes and then chooses to take the 200 damage there. Interesting choice to use the Priscilla like just in response to a casual attack. I would think that we would wait kind of maybe until end step, but probably we'll see how it works out. Paul going into turn 3 here, getting that Knowledge Stone again. So now we have 2 Omni Stones. The Magic Stone of Time serving as a blue-green stone. Paul choosing to just pass the turn, as many green decks will do. Seeing what Garrett has to work with now before recovery, paying another 100. We're going to try to flash in another Dark Alice Rabbit Princess. In response to the enter effect, we're going to see that Lorite come down, and we're going to set up attacks for the turn with Solaria's Wind. So what this is going to do is essentially, now that Garrett's played 1 card, it'll cost him 1 more to play a second card, and same for Paul, which I'm not quite sure if I would have used the Solaria's Wind quite in this moment, especially now that Paul's kind of on the back foot with having to be able to respond, especially so given the fact that Garrett will also have access to the free cheat-in potential from Gandennia's Mansion. So getting to cheat something in, ping himself for 5, chooses to throw that 500 damage thanks to Gandennia's trigger at the Handyman. Handyman will die, get to apply a -4/-4 to the to the Lorite there, getting to swing in. A little bit of a missed trigger there. We missed an opportunity to have a free search thanks to Gandennia's Mansion whenever one of your things is destroyed. Paul choosing to use Inheritance here at the end of turn to do Remnanthropos to try to search out another copy of the Eradia edition. Drawing for turn. Before recovery, we're going to see Pricia's Big Show number 3. So already up a position where we could, slam an Electra and call it a game, but I don't think Paul is playing Electra in this build. There's some other spicy stuff that we can grab off of Pricia's Big Show, which you'll potentially see as the game goes on. Going to try to play that Eradia. And then in response to the Eradia, we're going to see another Solaria's Wind tax there. Cursed Mirror is going to come down to hit the Eradia. Then we're going to see a pass. Again, not quite sure if I would use the Solaria's Wind there, although there is an element of you just want cards in the RFG as well, potentially for the Utsunes build, especially based on if he's playing things like any kind of... like Liberation, having more cards in the RFG is sometimes just better. Garrett's sitting on a pretty defensive hand, it seems like. Missing out on that search from destroying his own handyman, I think, kind of came back to bite him a little bit. It does look like Double Mirror, Last Believer, and the Gandennia Marvel Rare, none of which really helps here. Looks like maybe Mirror setting the stage potentially is also what could be in the hand. Swings hit for 2. We're going to see a 2-drop cast of that Pricia's Big Show. Prisia herself still being able to dodge Mirror. And this is what I talked about before, is there's still some spicy stuff here we can grab, specifically Spirit of Storms. So being a Spirit, this means that if the opponent has that, the Spirit of the Mirage Ruins, you can dodge it pretty nicely. When it enters from deck, you get to destroy 2 things, and you always get to draw a card, and then it's a 10-10 flying barrier. So this gets to kill 2 of the Dark Alices, draw a card. And then the Prisia can block the Dark Alice and get that off the board too. So a nice little clear with some swapping around of the pressure for Paul, and taking away any kind of... if you could do enough damage to Gandennia fast enough, it does make things a little bit awkward for her too. Garrett thinking about if there's a reason to play it aggressively, play it defensively, given what he's about to stare down. At minimum, he's taking 1,000 damage in the air, which is rough, going down to 2,000. And now Paul also has a Wind Resonator on board, which is really important if he is sitting on something like a Liberation. So now we have the ability to make that unchaseable, target something, and really get some good damage in. Do something like Spirit of Storms swinging in the air, and then Prisia could swing in response to a block. You then use Spirit of Storms with Liberation to pop it off the way and then get the 700 damage in that way. Especially since Garrett's sitting on Pain Stones, this is also not super great for him either. We're going to see a Setting the Stage of Providence. Just seems to like maybe draw a card here. Seeing if maybe we draw into another card or if it's worth our time. We're going to see... down comes that Last Believer, which can be helpful as a way to, if his life gets low, it's also damaging the opponent, so I get that. Also as a way to potentially send damage from Gandennia to something else to then send it to your opponent, which is also makes a lot of sense. We've also seen this come up in Lehen a little bit with Thunder Parasol. It's a cute little way to backdoor win the game. Swinging in with Spirit, we go down to 18, thinking about trying to swing with Last Believer in the play. I imagine we might see, if Paul decides to go in for a swing here, this is probably where we will see a similar kind of play like I was saying before with the Liberations. Oh, no, even before attackers are declared, looks like. We're just going to go ahead and do Liberation of the Winds to destroy the Spirit of Storms and Last Believer. It's unchaseable, so that'll get them both off the field, and we'll get to swing through for another 7. Goes down to 11. Not a great spot for Garrett to be in here. Ooh, and then we're just going to throw down another Spirit of Storms, which does get to draw a card regardless, but putting a flying barrier 10-10 is relevant here. We're going to try to play another Aradia that's going to eat another mirror, but that's fine. Because now Garrett's at a position where, especially now having paid for a setting the stage before recovery, that Spirit of Storms is presenting lethal, and so we have to deal with it, which is a little bit tricky. Did draw into a statue of the Ega Stone, which could help get rid of the easily get rid of the Spirit of Seeker of Storms, but then we still have to put out a body, so another, something to be able to block the Prisya is very important. Biggest concern there again is, is there another Liberation of the Winds, or even that Roach, that Replicant Shiva in the sideboard you have to worry about too. Call Stone here, hits another Moonshade. We are at a point where we are going to start to be able to not even pay for anything because we're so low on life. Does decide to go down to 7. Looks like using the 2 Emerald Tablets to do Sealed Stone of Ega. I wonder what mode this is being used for. Choosing to use the mode to make spiders. I think that's an interesting choice here. I get why it's there. It can block a flyer. They've got Bane, I understand. The biggest problem here is that the Replicant Shiva. I think I would have chosen the RFG mode instead just to get rid of it for sure. I think maybe we weren't thinking about Replicant Shiva. Tapping out here to go down to Gandennia's Beloved Butler, just trying to sit. This is going to get us to draw a new card, hoping that one of these gets us to survive the turn. Enough bodies out on board, that makes a lot of sense. Biggest problem becomes the flyers. And I think Paul here is pointing out that, even though your tokens can fly, Replicant Shiva is just going to get to blow all of them up. Has to do the full mode though, otherwise, and Paul will end up taking a little bit of damage from the First Believer killing it, but then the flyer can just swing in and it's enough for lethal. So I think kind of blanked out on the Replicant Shiva there instead of just hard RFGing, but that's it, and we move on to game 2. Paul once again getting to start with Solaria's Wind. Seeing a first turn Gandennia's mansion coming down here. We see Sword of Progression come down, and at the end of the turn we're going to go ahead and just tax just to get another card RFG'd. Set up for things like Liberation. Since we don't have to worry about a water will coin right now, we're going to go ahead and go with Aradia. Sending Remnathropos to the grave. Calling Stone. Do have access to that Gandennia's Beloved Housemate here. Trigger to try to target it with the burn damage from the mansion. That trigger from Gandennia to redirect is what's going to be Lorited here. And now this Lorite could be mirrored pretty easily, the weirdness there is, like, if you do it, you're still just going to lose the housemaid because it's going to take the 500 damage. And you get to draw a discard, you'll get some cycling here, but I'm not quite sure if it's worth the time because you'll still lose the body, and you kind of do need to apply pressure on Paul. What we saw from last game is just not a lot of stuff happened from Gandennia. You actually apply pressure so that Paul doesn't get comfortable time to just set up these Priscia chains like Big Show will sinks. So it does go ahead and just let that resolve. We do see a Gandennia's ninjas come in here. Going into Paul's turn. See that Aradia before recovery again. Lorite Mert makes an excellent resource for being able to just destroy anything thanks to that Liberation of the Winds. Although, Replicant Shiva also helps with that because she has Eternal, so she just kind of keeps doing it over and over again. Paul kind of checking how he wants to deal with these things here. Dealing with the Restraints of Empathy that's grabbed wouldn't be that big of a deal, honestly, for this deck. We are going to see the Solarized Shiva here. It's going to get to potentially blow up both of them, although I imagine the ninjas is sacrificed. Cast is good. Enter effect goes on the chase. One of them's going to get banished. The question is, who are you dealing the damage to? I think you deal it to Paul. Really? Ultimately, nope. We're just going to choose to deal it to self to then redirect it to there, which gets us to draw and discard. And draw again. Because we had a Resonator with Gandennia and his name destroyed, we can put in a Beloved Butler. This is a couple missed triggers here. So we'd get Restraints of Empathy trigger. We'd also get Butler's trigger, and we'll get Mansion's trigger. So we'll get to do 2 searches, plus Restraints of Empathy, plus draw a card. So we can use Butler to search for another ninja. We can use Mansion to search for another Marvel rare, and then we can just draw a free card. Resolving our next search. Thanks to Mansion, which gets us the Butler, like I said. So just like a lot of hand advantage really quick. There's a world where I think Gandennia develops enough hand advantage that especially with this build with setting the stage, that Roar of Dark Blessing would actually be pretty good. You generate so many cards in this list. Your hand advantage is so flooded that it's very easy to just be like, well, I'm just going to burn 3 of these and make you discard 3 cards and then set up for Beloved Butler to be able to finish the job. Certainly an option, especially if you have multiple Butlers in hand, right? If you have multiple Butlers in hand and one of your guys gets destroyed, then you can just go kind of insanely plus. We pay down for a Dark Alice Rabbit Princess. Choosing what we're going to try to discard here. Discard a ninja and a mansion. I'm honestly a little surprised we didn't just sacrifice the Dark Alice to keep another +1 card advantage, but it's a matter of what you need those cards for, as opposed to getting more Gandennia cards in the graveyard, which I understand. getting pretty close to the ability to judgment. The question is, what kind of follow-up is there? You'd be staring into, with no setting the stage before recovery, you'd kind of need one to go for the Tisiphone line here. So that's certainly an option. You just need 5 Gandennia cards. I think we're certainly there. The question is also, is Garrett even playing the Tisiphone line, which I think is a very cool, neat tech for this deck, but we'll have to wait and see if it's actually being played. Full group of cards here. Do we have another Butler like we saw before? Another Dark Alice, it looks like. Potentially at least one Restraints of Empathy in the hand. I'm going to try to use Mansion to put in a Housemaid. Gonna get the Housemaid destroyed, which puts us in another Butler. Again, it's another big cycle here. Looks like 2 more Butlers. So this is, again, a search and a draw, and a search and a draw, and a search. So we turned 3 cards into 5 cards. You can see what I mean about Roar of Dark Blessing being able to generate a lot of stuff very quickly. Especially since all of this appears to just be resolving. I would imagine that Paul might not even have a cancel in hand at this point. Though Paul only having 3 cards in hand, a Roar of Dark Blessing here, what I think would be very, very good. Even if it burns the last cancel, then you're kind of free to do whatever else you want for the turn. Although, to Paul's defense, if there is a Roar of Dark Blessing coming down, I imagine we see something like immediately doing Liberation of Winds and taxing so that Garrett can't do any big follow-up on that same turn, which is kind of one of the whole purposes of the Solaria's Wind in general. It's designed to kind of make these sequences stumble to provide a little bit more of a buffer to green. So let's see what comes out of this. Gonna see a Judgment. Certainly have enough Gandennia cards. So Gandennia comes down here, setting ourselves up for the Tisiphone line potentially. Certainly at a good point where we'll be able to potentially burn Paul for enough damage here. We do have access to the Gandennia Stone to be able to produce double black, which sets us up nicely. Does set us up to be able to protect Tisiphone through like a mirror, but again, we're at the same position before where you have to be really careful because of that Solaria's Wind, right? That's the biggest piece. So it's just a matter of what's going to see fly here. We're going to see pay for double black sack a stone, deal 500. That 500 is then going to be redirected towards one of the butlers, who's then going to try to pump everybody up by +5/+5 if that gets to resolve. Doesn't super help here because of the eternal blocker. It's mainly that we just want a target to be able to do that too. And then we're going to use that double black for the Tisiphone. So the way this works is Tisiphone gets to, as she enters the field, you choose a number of 3,000 or less, multiple of 100. The attack and defense of this card is the attack that you choose, and then on enter it deals damage equal to its attack to you. And so what you do there is you get to what you do there is then you just call 3,000. Gandennia takes the 3,000 and then redirects it at your opponent's face. So in response to the cast, what we're going to do is we're going to see a Liberation of the Winds to try to destroy the Gandennia, which in his place is going to then just replace that by destroying one of the Gandennia resonators, which is great. So we don't really care about the liberations because it's a replacement effect. So we can kill the butler off here. And then when Gandennia is going to take a 3,000 damage point swing from the Tisiphone enter, you can pop another one of the butlers instead of replacing her, so that sets us up to be able to survive for the next turn. So we lose butler number 2. And now we're at a position where Paul's going to take 3,000 damage. Paul will be down to 10. We'll be staring down a 30-30 with Pierce, and we'll have to figure out how to survive it, because an Eternal Blocker doesn't do anything against a piercing attacker. So we go into it here. Garrett fully tapped out, though. We are going to see... Oh, it looks like we're going to see our last here. Goes to play the Ninja, but can't because of the Solarius Wind. Has already played cards this turn. Seemingly, this is how we're going to try to put Paul down to 300. I don't think there would be enough will there. Unless he hasn't cast anything this turn yet, which is very possible. So we would have still, under the tax, be able to pay 1 for it. I'd have to go back and double check. But if that's the case, because of the stat pumps as well, then gets to swing for another 700 damage, puts Paul to 5, which is rough. So we swing in, think about swinging in, decide not to. Paul's going to go ahead and just have to swings in. Can't afford to swing in right now with Shiva because Garrett will just take the damage and have it redirected to Gandennia, which will then instead get it burned at his face. So that's a problem. So we're just going to see the big old skeleton boy get cast here to remove all other resonators from the game, which will take the Tisiphone off the board for sure. And since nothing's destroyed, we can't get another one. Another butler that might be in hand doesn't get to come down. It's 1,000. And now if Paul had another, it'd be pretty good for Paul here if he had another, or if he had saved that liberation, because then he could use it on the Remnithropos and the Gandennia to get her off the board, so that the stone that produces 500, that deals 500 damage to you, wouldn't be able to kill him. But just like by calling stone, we find another source for 500 damage to be dealt to self, which then gets to burn Paul. And then we go to game 3. So a very interesting back and forth there. We go into game 3. Paul's maybe a little bit more aware of exactly what is going to be coming down for Gandennia and how to stop it. It'd be a question of whether more things get canceled, or whether we save liberations for those opportune moments to kill the Gandennia to prevent her from being able to burn us if she flips. Garrett's going to go ahead and start with a Oborozuki. Getting to set up a nice little drain option, which is very helpful as well for being able to burn yourself. If you can keep your life high while doing it, that's pretty good. Turn 1, we're going to see that Radia come down. Gonna get to resolve. Our zombie boy gets discarded to the graveyard. Calling stone. If I'm Garrett here, I probably just start by attacking. We're not suddenly going to make the oboe get that much bigger than what it is, so we might as well just try to get our damage here, especially since, you know, the main way we're going to discard is through something like Dark Alice, but like the Oboe's locked in at being a 4/4 at this point, so you might as well just let it ride. Do see a Handyman come down here. No response from Paul on that one. Hits another Fossil Stone. And then a pass. For Garrett, we're in here turn 2. Gonna probably take a couple swings. Again, this is one of those positions where, like, I don't think there's a reason to not just start by swinging. That's the overall advantage you have here. Does go in for it. Again, we see it looks like Apricia's Big Show again, trying to set up something. The question is this one going to resolve? Garrett says no. Garrett's going to go ahead and use Mirror on that Apricia, which I think is the correct choice there, getting out of the hand. The Apricia did a lot of work for Paul in game 1. Keeping that off the board seems helpful. Takes ball down to 28. We're going to see our first sort of progression of this game. Seeing the reanimation of the guy thanks to the fossil being able to help produce more will. Getting those bodies off the board, we're going to see a Ega Stone to make more spiders. I think that's an interesting choice. I certainly like it now that we've already reanimated the skeleton. Significantly less threatening, although you still have to contend with the Replicant Shiva. That's the biggest piece, is you make all of these tokens, but then Replicant Shiva just gets to kill them. It is a full cast for Paul to be able to do that, so if Garrett has some way to be able to stop it, that would be very good. Although it'd have to be something like Ray Asdable, which I'm not sure that Garrett is running in the list. So Prizzy's going to get to destroy all those tokens, deal some damage to the ninja. Going to try to swing into the ninja. Imagine the ninja's going to get banished to maybe draw a card, deals damage to himself, gets to draw another card, and then gets to swing in for 1,000. Takes here down to 30. Going into Garrett's turn here. Before recovery, we're going to see a setting the stage of Providence. Paul decides now's a good time as any to throw down Sword of Progression number 2. Might as well cancel it a draw. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to use it for this turn anyway. So Garrett gets a free turn. Right, so this is a pretty free turn. If he can set up something here, Paul's at less than 3,000 life. If we had, you know, a Dark Alice in hand, plus a Tisiphone, plus a couple more cards in graveyard, we could potentially get to a judgment here. It has not been the most aggressive start for Garrett, but there is an opportunity here for him to just close out the game with the Tisiphone line. It would be risky, but very, very doable. It would require exactly, you know, based on the number of things in graveyard. If we have 3 Gandennia cards in the graveyard, then we could do Dark Alice, discard 2 more, Judgment, cast Tisiphone, and then kill Paul, which would be the thing to do if you're given an opportunity. Though the real risk there becomes if in response to the Tisiphone, Paul has something like, or what you do is, like, in response to the enter effect of the Tisiphone, you do Liberation so that the 3,000 has already been called, and then you just kill the Gandennia with no other Gandennia cards in the field to protect her, so then Garrett would take 3,000 damage and just lose the game here. Going to be a full tap out for a Gandennia's beloved butler, just to try to search for something. Not great. Does feel like we're kind of maybe running out of steam here. Pay another 200, goes down to 26 to get Mansion live. See, this to me doesn't feel great. We had access to something to be able to get rid of that butler without destroying it, we'd be in really good shape here. This would be 1600, takes Garrett down to 10. That's inherently risky with all these pain stones. See, a falchion, that will do it. That should actually close the game, provided that Paul decides to get greedy about it. With Garrett's fully tapped out, there's no reason to not, though, right? Right now, swinging in for 16 total. You discard 5 cards. That makes it 26 because of adding +2/+2 or +1/+1 counters. Definitely an option. Doesn't seem like Paul decided to go for that option, though. Maybe doesn't have enough cards in hand to go for the 5 discarded cards. Which is a little unfortunate. Sometimes you want to try to capitalize on a tap out moment and just don't find it. Well, there's one to add a couple more counters to her. And then another to give himself some abilities. Okay. So we had at least 2 cards. So we could have gotten... I mean, I think there was a world where you take Garrett down to 2 regardless, right? Because that means that, like, any source of any attempts to use these pain stones would be lethal. Like, you just lock him out of 2 of his stones at that point in time. Also locks him out of using the addition. The addition would take him down to 5. For instance, this Dark Atlas that's being cast here wouldn't be castable if we had just taken him down. Oh, and Paul has so many cards in hand. Yeah, I think that's just a missed opportunity of just like, let's just close out the game here with the falchion, unfortunately. Seeing some cycling, discarding here. Playing a cheat end, handmaiden, go down to 3 life. Draw a Gandennia trigger to try to burn it. Gonna cheat in successfully. The butler does look like Paul's going to try to Lorite the butler, cheat in, potentially. The butler won't be on field, which is pretty good, because if there is the Josefowitz line here, you don't want, you want something like Liberation to be able to answer the problem, right? And keep the Gandennia things off board. Not exactly sure what the Lorite stopped there then, if not the cheat in. Do you see the flipped Cassandra? It's going to deal 500 damage to the butler, who then pops the board by 5. Down comes Josefowitz. And Paul with the replicant Kaguya. Wow, absolutely great. This does set up Paul to be able to protect against something else, any kind of automatic trigger that might be coming down, so that Josefowitz is not going to get to stick on board, and at that point in time, Falchion could just swing in for it lethal. So, does get to RFG a card as well to set up for being able to produce Moon. Garrett seeing if he has anything else to play with his 1 will. Does look like you're staring down lethal here. Could make 2 more will, right? If you had a second Tisiphone in hand, you could try for that. The problem is, once again, now that the Replicant Kagi is out, even that would be able to stop the enter effect of the Tisiphone, so it'd be a 3,000, but then you wouldn't go anywhere else. And then from there, the Falchion just swings in for lethal, but you still have to answer the Gandennia is the biggest piece here. We do see a Ninja get cast, not really sure why, and then we see the... they kind of accept that the board state's not winnable for Garrett, and that is the end of the match. So there you guys have it. Deck profiles will be up later this week from Paul, and until next time, this is TMO73 saying, class dismissed.